Hello everyone, it is Monday the 15th of May 2023. Welcome back to the D3D4 football podcast dedicated to all things Leagues 1 and 2. We are here for a pretty brief express run through of the first legs, which included some very tight games and some games that weren't really as tight, if we're being honest about that. It's myself...
Great analysis.
Well, it's just a matter of truth, isn't it? It's myself, Edward Walker, joined by David Jenkins, Chris Stringer and Harry Thomas. David, how do we find you, mate?
Surprised is probably the word of the evening, isn't it? Shocked, surprised. In some
I went
respects.
for stunned. Can I have that one?
Yeah, for sure. Any S words at work, right? Surprised, stunned, starstruck,
flabbergasted.
That's not beginning.
We're going to see how many of these different words we can come up with before the end of the show to describe one particular result. Chris, how are you doing?
Yeah, plodding season for us. So yeah, it's been good to watch some more successful teams play some pretty nice football and some not so nice football.
Are you looking forward to Oxford City next year?
Yeah, it'd be nice to go to a good stadium in Oxford.
We'll do that same dat. That would be. Harry, how are we doing?
Not bad, thank you. I've spent months gutted that we didn't make the playoffs, and then the second-hand angst that I've felt for every single team over the last few days has made me happy that the season's already over.
I was thinking about that. I quite miss Bert being in playoff campaigns, and then you actually get there and you realise, do you know what? It's kind of better just being mid-table and just getting to watch as a neutral observer and not have to be immersed in it yourself. But we're here to run through the 4 games of League 1 and League 2 that took place between Friday the 12th of May and Sunday the 14th of May. Reminder before we get going, this podcast is in partnership with The Big Step, which tackles football's relationship with gambling. There is an excessive presence of gambling adverts within football, and The Big Step continue to do great work to raise awareness about the dangers of gambling and the impact it can have on so many people's lives. We'll get going, and we'll begin as always with the world's best third tier.
League 1.
League 1. We've got to start on Friday night, and this result just makes me giggle even thinking about it. At London Road, Peterborough United 4, Sheffield Wednesday 0. I was at this game at London Road, up in the South Stand. There's not many times I've come out of a football match speechless, but this was one of those occasions. I think before we dive into it fully, I'm going to run through a bit of team news. Peterborough United were unchanged for this game. They still had the 4-2-3-1. It was goalkeeper Will Norris behind the centre-back pairing of Ronnie Edwards and Frankie Kent. Deployed a pair of attacking fullbacks in Harrison Burrows and Joe Ward, Hector Cipriano and Oliver Norburn at the base of midfield, Jack Taylor playing in that number 10 role behind Johnson Clark-Harris, Ephron Mason-Clark on the left, Kwame Poku out on the right. Sheffield Wednesday, well, a change to them was Michael Iekwe coming in on the left side, the back three instead of Jaden Brown. So he partnered Aidan Flint and Dominic Iortha in that trio in front of goalkeeper Cameron Dawson. Marvin Johnson, Barry Bannon, Wilt Volks and Liam Palmer across that midfield. Callum Patterson dropped back into attacking midfield. Josh Windass earning his first start since returning, partnered Michael Smith up top. And I remember going into this game, boys, kind of thinking, all right, let's see how this goes. There was a big points gap between these two in the regular table, 19 points, we said, 6 v third. And, right, who saw that coming?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure
I'm
I remember
stunned,
saying it.
absolutely stunned by it.
I'm sure it was in my prediction, yeah.
I've just left a bit lost for words even thinking about it, really. I mean, I suppose we'll run through the first half of this as well. I found myself at half-time, Peterborough were 2-0 ahead, and I could not understand how they were actually 2-0 up, because I just was not that convinced by them. They had quite a bit of possession in their own half. It felt really shaky and hesitant. Like there was a lot of it with the centre backs, with the full backs. Naturally, very attacking players, Burrows and Ward. You expect them to be pushing a bit higher up, but they'd hesitate on the ball, make a difficult choice about where to play the pass, and eventually had to go up in midfield to Hector Cipriano, who'd have a man right tight to him, so he'd have to either play it backwards or lose the ball. And Sheffield Wednesday were taking advantage of that in the early stages. I remember a 1-on-1 for Michael Smith that Will Norris had to be called upon to stop. And I was watching them thinking, if you can carry on like this into Hillsborough, you could be in really big trouble. Like, you could get really taken apart here.
Yeah, I mean, it is an interesting game because, you know, you're right when you say that Sheffield Wednesday were possibly, in some respects, at least in the first half, the technically better side. But I thought Peterborough were just so good at stretching them, at just stretching that back line and creating space. For all 4 goals, actually, they didn't do anything spectacular. They just did a really good job of stretching that Sheffield Wednesday back three.
Those opportunities certainly came in the second half. In the first, it was quite rare, and it was from one of those thirsts that the first goal originates from Jack Taylor. Cameron Dawson.
He's had such a good second half to this season, hasn't he? And then to come out and do that to make it 1-0, watching it back as well.
Just not a strong enough hand, is it?
I think the replay from behind the goal as well, there was nobody in his way. It's not one of those where the keeper's seen it late and not got down quick enough. He had such a good view of the ball. And yeah, he must be absolutely gutted.
Yeah, and I'm not convinced by him on some of the other goals as well. He's not done anything glaringly wrong, but I do question his positioning on, I think it was the third goal where it's come across play. And possibly on the second even, but it's a pretty good hit and it's come off a deflection, so maybe that's just being a little harsh.
That was really disappointing, actually, that second goal from Joe Ward, because I was watching it live and I really thought it was just an incredible hit, and I was quite gutted to actually see there was a deflection that caused it to fly that way.
Yeah. But yeah, I think Dawson must be really, really frustrated with himself, specifically for that first goal, but also his overall performance I don't think was quite good enough.
I don't think the whole Sheffield Wednesday performance really was quite good enough, considering the gap between these two, and it's just an absolute stunner. I remember being at half time with it 2-0, thinking that Posh are 2-0 up, and I've not been 100% convinced on them, but they come out second half, and wow, they were absolutely superb, Peterborough United. Absolutely fantastic. They had to dig in at times, I think, to preserve their clean sheet. But you talk about a game plan when you're 2-0 up and you're naturally expecting your opponents to come out with all guns blazing essentially at the start of the second half. And then you get a third within 5 minutes of the restart. That just went absolutely perfectly for them.
Yeah, I think we all were backing Sheffield Wednesday for this game, right?
Unfortunately.
Yeah, and I do wonder the one thing I said in the in my sort of prediction was maybe failing on getting into that top two would knock Sheffield Wednesday's confidence. Now I didn't think it would knock it this much.
They didn't come into this in bad nick. They got some wins to finish off their season.
They did, but you know, if you're coming in at sixth place, you've worked your way up into it. Whereas if you're Sheffield Wednesday's perspective, you've probably been fighting the entire season to get one of those automatic promotion spots, and you've failed. And so the mentality going into this kind of game, which is high stakes, high pressure, is slightly different.
I do see what you mean, but I think Sheffield Wednesday kind of knew with 2 weeks to spare that it wasn't going to happen. Certainly before the penultimate game, promotion got secured with a game to spare, of course, and they knew after that game in hand, look, it's probably not going to happen for us. And the mentality really at that point should have shifted towards these playoffs. And
it should have done, but you know, if you've been working at something for 12 months, it's quite hard to shift it in 2 weeks.
I'm just absolutely stunned, really, at how abject Sheffield Wednesday were, and they went without their moments in the first half especially, but then having conceded that third, you were looking at the situation. I remember John Verrill, our Peterborough guest, talking about this in the playoff preview. There's probably nothing better for Peterborough at that stage, because Sheffield Wednesday had to start committing the numbers forwards. They've got to start getting more bodies into the box, and Peterborough could just be let loose on the counter. And Ephron Mason-Clark, Johnson Clark Harris, and Quarry Puck on the counter. Yeah, no thanks.
I mean, that's going to be the thing at Hillsborough as well, isn't it? Sheffield Wednesday will have to go for it for a minute one, and you'd think, especially with that 4-goal cushion, Peterborough will be happy to just sit back, just soak up the pressure, and then try and pick them off. And they score 1 goal at Hillsborough, and if it wasn't already, the tie's over, isn't it? So
probably, yeah.
If it's not already, yeah.
Yeah, Sheffield Wednesday needs something really, really big to get this back.
And it kind of worries as well, because I was going into this. Sheffield Wednesday are a really big side. They've got a lot of big players in there, a lot of aerial presence, no more so than Michael Smith up top, and then people like Marvin Johnson and Barry Bannon who could put such quality deliveries into them out on the left. And so I kind of feared for Peterborough's 2 centre-backs here, Frankie Kent and Ronnie Edwards, who are both good players, but neither particularly known for exceptional aerial prowess. They were absolutely brilliant in that game on Friday night. Positioning of Ronnie Edwards, absolutely superb. They dealt with Wednesday's threat that went pretty direct at times, especially in the second half when they were behind for that big margin. And it was such a superb defensive performance. Will Norris deserves his credit in goal for some of the saves he made to not only keep Peterborough in the game, but to preserve their lead when they had it.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And I think, to be fair, in general, I think this is down for Sheffield Wednesday. This is probably more down to individual errors than a poor, abject team performance. I'm not sure whether you guys would agree, but I feel like, you know, on the part of Dawson in particular, it's probably not been his best performance, and I think it's very uncharacteristic. In some respects, though, I'd probably argue that I don't necessarily think that I would agree that Peterborough were necessarily exceptional. I think it was more the fact that Sheffield Wednesday were just not at the races. Potentially some lag from the rest of the season. I mean, their general starting 11 has been fairly consistent across the season. So I'm wondering whether it's that sort of end of season lag that's starting to creep in, where it's more of a kind of settle down. The only thing I can really akin it to, I guess, is, Sunderland, in the sense of how many times that they kind of got to this point, and struggled. League One isn't necessarily what it used to be, and it's certainly not an easy ride. And I think teams like Sheffield Wednesday maybe are falling for the same sort of thing that Sunderland had for a number of years, where they sort of thought, okay, we'll get down into League One, it'll be nice and easy to push ourselves back up. But I think this league is becoming harder and harder to get out of, and certainly much easier for teams to be underestimating the quality at this level.
I don't think I'm ever going to be able to wrap my head around this result. It's just utterly so bizarre how Peterborough were able to pull themselves so far away. And there was one thing I wanted to point out, boys. It was one of the substitutions that Sheffield Wednesday made. They went 3-0 down. About 10 minutes later, they made a swap. Callum Patterson came off, Lee Gregory came on. And then it's the 62nd minute sub that I can't wrap my head around. He takes off Michael Smith and he brings on Dennis Adeniran. And I was looking at that thinking, you're generally not going to change the shape at all. You're going to stick with that back three, with that midfield five and the two up top when you're 3-0 down, taking off your top scorer in the process for a midfielder who I think Sheffield Wednesday fans will admit has generally not done much this season. Like, is someone able to tell me there was a knock on Michael Smith or some valid reason for that change? Because surely you have to go attacking as possible when 3-0 down.
I mean, you'd think a 4-3-3 or a 4-3-2-1 when you're bringing on that kind of signing as well, wouldn't you? Like, that to me would be the smarter choice. I completely agree with you, Ed. I don't understand why you'd go more defensive unless it's purely because of kind of morale.
It wasn't even more defensive. It was just sticking exactly as it was, and I just it didn't make any sense to me at the time. I really didn't understand it.
I mean, yeah, I guess it's possible that maybe they were trying to just limit the damage at that point when you've got a team that's running that rampant, maybe just some fresh legs ready for the next leg to try and push further, unless maybe he was an injury doubt behind the scenes beforehand. But, yeah, I mean, the change itself for a like for like doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you're kind of facing down the barrel of a 4-0 loss anyway in the first leg of playoffs, right?
That change was at 3-0, and then it was 4-0, and the Clark Harris goal, he just bullies the defenders to the header. It goes second phase. It's initially attacked down the right. The ball's played back into Clark Harris, who just gets up. And, I mean, if I was a Peterborough United fan watching that game, I would have started laughing at that point, just in how much disbelief about how easy this was against a supposedly superior opponent. I'm just absolutely genuinely astounded. If it wasn't clear already, I'm genuinely astounded by how that game happened. David, any hope? I've got the note down second leg here. Is there any point having... What on earth does Darren Moore do now?
Well, if he turns this round, it's something very special, isn't it? I mean, it's hard to put this into words, really, isn't it? I mean, you're stunned enough at this result, but if there was a chance of them turning this around, it would be result of playoff history. I'd imagine they'd probably get something at Hillsborough. I'm not suggesting for a minute they'll turn this scoreline around, but I'd imagine out of the two legs they'll probably get something out of it, potentially a fight back. But I'm not sure you can really see this sort of scoreline being overturned in this sort of way.
In my mind, Harry, there's three possible outcomes here. One on Thursday is that Sheffield Wednesday do get back into it. They make the aggregate scoreline a bit more respectable. Alternatively, it could get an even bigger margin. Peterborough might well go and pick them off even more and enjoy an even more enjoyable night at Hillsborough. Or we see the greatest comeback of all time, and I don't think that's highly likely to happen, because I think when you look at all the comebacks that have been there in playoff history, none of them have been by more of a 2-goal losing margin to overcome.
Yeah, I mean, and this'll please the Wednesday fans who've been paying attention to how bad I am at predicting things this season. I think the most likely outcome is that Peterborough extend the aggregate score. I think they'll be able to sit back. And my concern with Sheffield Wednesday this year has been they seem a bit too easy to frustrate. I think if if they feel like a game's not going their way, you can really sort of get under the skin and wind them up. And that's what Peterborough did in this first leg, I think. I think they just sat back, they took the pressure, and when Sheffield Wednesday realised it wasn't working out, they were then able to pick them off. And I think the pressure could get to them. It's that big crowd thing, isn't it? That you'd imagine there'll be quite a lot of people in on Thursday night. Probably not as many as there would have been if it was a tighter scoreline. But if things start badly and Peterborough get the first goal, and then you've got a huge crowd turning on you, essentially, I think it could potentially get a little bit ugly for Sheffield Wednesday.
Well, dare I ask, is it going to be a huge crowd?
It's definitely not going to be as big as it would have been. You'd like to think that most people will still go down. I mean, there's a chance, isn't there? Peterborough won 4-0, so why can't Sheffield Wednesday win 4-0? That's the mentality that you've got to have. But like you say, it probably would be the greatest ever comeback.
Oh no, it wouldn't. Probably it would. I'm not considering anything else close to it.
I'd be more than happy for them to win 4-0, go into extra time, and then see where it goes between these two. Like, throughout the season, they've had some good battles as well. The way they've both played has been nothing short of spectacular. I'd be more than happy for an extra half an hour between these two sides.
Imagine a 4-0 and then Peterborough win on penalties.
Oh,
Scenes.
It'd be the luck of Wednesday this year, wouldn't it? You know, not many teams can go 19 games unbeaten, find themselves in this position.
23 unbeaten, David.
Well, sorry, yeah. And, you know, then you find yourself in a position where, as I said on my preview, you know, in 4 of the last 5 seasons, that would have been enough for an automatic place, let alone the title straight out. Just so happens to be that they found themselves this year in just a league with 2 other absolutely exceptional sides that have somehow managed to not only break the 100-point mark, but we've got 3 sides that are above 90 points. Like, it's just ridiculous. Like, this season just, you know, none of us saw Peterborough winning this. And to be honest with you, it's almost inevitable now, but I'm sure we'll all eat our words, and somehow Sheffield Wednesday will do something that will just make us look like idiots again.
Miracle of all miracle needed in this second leg. Playoff side, they just do not care about what you do in the regular season. Brutal. Can be absolutely brutal on it. We'll move on. The other game in League One was on Saturday, and it finished Bolton Wanderers 1, Barnsley 1, a much more closer contest. Team news in terms of this game. James Trafford back in the Bolton goal after being rested as a precaution. That back 3 of George Johnston, Ricardo Santos and Johan Tall all retained. Carl Dempsey and Conor Bradley coming back into the team as well. They played attacking midfield and right wing back respectively. Gethin Jones didn't make it at left wing back, so Randall Williams took that role out wide on the left hand side. Josh Sheehan and Aaron Morley made up the Bolton central midfield pair. Elias Kuchunga picked to partner Dion Charles up top in a 3-4-1-2. For Barnsley, very familiar formation for us. Harry Oisted continuing his place in goal. The big news for them, Mads Andersen, their Danish captain, back into the centre of the back 3. Liam Kitchen to his left, Bobby Thomas to his right. Let Jordan Williams go back up to his regular right wing-back role alongside his regular midfield partners, Nicky Cadnut on the left, Herbie Kane, Luca Connell, Adam Phillips in the centre, Slobodan Tedic picked to partner Devante Cole from the off. David, I found this Bolton Barnsley game actually a pretty good entertaining affair. Very open first half, pretty open second. 2 teams just trying to go at each other from the off. It was a very entertaining affair at the U-Bowl Stadium.
Yeah, and I feel a really tight affair here as well. You know, almost as contrasting as you could possibly get 2 playoff games in League One so far. I mean, both of the goals being really close to each other around that hour mark too. You know, decent enough goals as well, and just quite clinical from both players, from Nicky Cadden and from Dion Charles. You know, in general, yeah, it's kind of what you want though, isn't it? Really, like going into the second playoff game, not really knowing what's going on. I'd arguably say that Barnsley probably still maintains some sort of advantage, with the next leg being at home. They've done really well to kind of keep this as a draw at the Uni Bowl. And I'd probably expect them to get something, but yeah, I mean, as a first leg, there's not really much more you can ask for, is there, to give yourself, I suppose, again, unlike the other leg that we've had, some sort of element of surprise and where you're not really sure what's going to happen, and to keep that suspense in these playoff races.
Would you agree with that, Harry? I found Bolton and Barnsley had slightly different approaches of attacking. Bolton, we know, are a very heavy possession-based sides. They're probably the best users of the ball of these four playoff sides, and they'll try to work their patterns of play. And I remember low ball slizzing in from the right, causing quite a few problems potentially. And Barnes' success seems to be with making movement in behind from their strikers, and that long throw that Bobby Thomas had caused a lot of hassle to Bolton throughout.
Yeah, well, I think you predicted it before at half-time as well, didn't you, that it was the fullbacks for Barnsley that seemed to be having so much joy. They were finding a lot of space, and obviously Nicky Cadden then got in and got the goal. It sounds like a pretty obvious thing to say about the only one of the 4 games that ended as a draw, but this was comfortably the tightest and the most tense of the playoff games, I would say. And with David in that, I really don't know who to call in that second leg. I think I was a bit frustrated maybe with some of the chances that Bolton afforded Barnsley. I mean, James Trafford made that really good save against Bobby Thomas in the second half from that free kick. But if I was being critical of Bolton, I'd say that maybe he shouldn't have been able to sort of get in there so easily and take that shot. I'm also a bit gutted that we were denied that Adam Phillips wonder goal. If that had been about 6 inches lower, that fizzer in the first half would have been one of the goals of the season. But I think, for the most part, it was pretty cagey, but we got to see what both teams are all about. And some of the attacking football was really, really impressive. And Nicky Cadden's goal especially was brilliant.
It was, and I think there were warning shots, actually, I felt, in the first half. That Bobby Thomas throw, as I mentioned, it caused problems because of where the ball would come out afterwards. I think Bolton largely did a good job on it. Strong defensive performance, I thought, from Ricardo Santos in the centre that back three. But the problem is that ball then gets loose to the edge of the box where you've got Adam Phillips, as you mentioned, Harry, who can have that drive, and Nicky Cadden was tempting it in the first half as well. And I was looking at it and thinking, Cadden's going to get one of these right at some point, and lo and behold, he does exactly that. Lovely goal, but a really good to get such a quick response from Bolton through Dion Charles. David hinted on it, Harry, and I'm wondering if you feel as well. Do you think one team will prefer that result more than the others from this first leg?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it is advantage Barnsley, isn't it? They will probably be a bit frustrated to have gone ahead and then conceded, and especially to have conceded so quickly. And I think actually it was pretty unfortunate for the goal. When I watched it back on the highlights, Harry Istid actually gets a bit of a hand to it and sort of pushes it into Dion Charles' path. And if he hadn't touched it, it probably would have just flashed across goal and not got a touch on it. So they'll be a bit disappointed with that. And we know what Bolton can do attacking wise. I don't think by any means it's going to be an easy game just because they're at home. But I suppose, on balance, you'd think that it's probably slightly advantage Barnsley.
Do you agree with that, Chris?
It's so hard to say. I mean, as everyone else has said, it was such a tight game. It maybe is advantage Barnsley, and the reason I say that is the atmosphere at the Uniball was so good, and if you can't sneak a win with that, and with the pressure against Barnsley on the other side, I think maybe Barnsley do slightly have the edge. I did think over the 90 minutes as well that they did slightly edge in terms of performance. So I'm not going to, nail my colours to the wall and say it'll definitely be Barnsley, but I'm edging towards that side at the moment.
I think that not only is that early goal going to be key, but I feel like this first leg is more like a feeling out process for both of these sides. And I'm not sure whether it was this game I said it about in my preview, but I felt that there was at least going to be some sort of feeling out process in this first leg, and it might be kind of the second leg, given there was nothing to call between these two teams really throughout the season. Pretty much only 5 points that was the difference maker across the whole of the season. As we said, kind of Bolton with one of the best passing teams in the league this year, arguably one of the best attacks. Barnsley also only being outscored by, I believe they were only outscored by Sheffield Wednesday, Ipswich and Plymouth. So, there's clearly goals in both sides, and there has been across the season, but I think it's just going to depend on a couple of players and those individuals as well, because I think both teams have got those individuals that can really make the difference in these sort of games. And not every team, I guess, can claim to have people that can be that real difference maker. But both of these sides, I think, throughout the season, they've definitely had players that can sort of jump in there and just inch those slight edges And I feel like that's what this game's going to need in this second leg, is that someone's going to have to take the game by the scruff of their neck and just run with it.
So are we all back in Barnsley then, on balance?
I think so.
It goes against what I said in the preview, though. That's the problem.
Okay, so I'd
I'm
like
gonna
to
stick with
congratulate
Bolton.
Bolton. I'm going to congratulate Bolton for making their way to Wembley.
I mean, I was already torn, like, prior to this in the preview anyway. As I said in there, like, my heart really thinks that I want Bolton to do this based on all of their, all of the difficulties they've had over the last, like, 5 seasons or so. But my head just says, like, Barnsley across the season have just been so ridiculous. Like, their consistency has just been so good. Like, I couldn't see past them. And even after this first leg, it might be a really tight affair between the two teams, but I just still feel like, second leg being at Oakwell as well, I just feel like I'm going to stick to my guns. I feel like Barnsley will edge it.
They could be pretty gung-ho when they're at it, Barnsley, and that can make for a very entertaining second leg, which I like to think this could be. I've felt like quite a number of the first legs have been fairly tight, cautious affairs, because, and I hate to use this old cliche, but it is true. You can't win a tie in the first leg, but you can lose a tie in the first leg. Sheffield Wednesday proving that. I'm going to stop bringing up Sheffield Wednesday now for their own sake. We'll drop down instead and look at the world's best 4th tier.
League 2.
The first game in League 2 in the playoffs was on Saturday evening. Salford City 1, Stockport County 0. Team news to this was a single change for Salford City. Nothing new in that defence. Alex Cairn staying in goal. Sat behind the back four of Ivo Toure, Adrian Mariappa, Theo Vassell and Liam Shepherd. Elliot Watt and Stevie Mann, the usual partners at the base of a 4-2-3-1. Luke Bolton out on the right. Callum Hendry playing behind striker Matt Smith. The change was Conor McCannley, picked out at left wing ahead of Louis Barry. Stockport, a more changed side though, 2 major changes and a fairly notable change of shape. Ben Hinchcliffe staying in goal. Chris Hussey and Carl Knorr, respective wing-backs. Neil Byrne brought into the back 3 alongside Fraser Horstal and Akil Wright. Miles Hippolyte, Rowan Crosdale, Callum Camps, and the second change, Conor Lemony Evans, forming a flat midfield 4. Just Jack Stretton leading the line for County. Isaac Oluwafe only on the bench. Had to recall youngster Ethan Pye from Gateshead in order to make the matchday squad. He was due to play for Gateshead in the upcoming FA Trophy final, but he will now be not with them for that Wembley fixture. I couldn't help but look at those team sheets, boys, and it kind of made me wonder. There's some notable Stockport absentees in this. We knew Carl Wootton was going to be out of action, their top scorer, but there was the possibility of seeing Paddy Madden and Will Collar in there, either in the starting 11 or on the bench. Neither of them in the squad. That's all 3 of Stockport's top scorers unavailable, the players who have hit double figures. There's quite a drop-off between those 3 and the rest. I couldn't help but look at this, Chris, and think, Salford have got an opportunity here if they take it.
Yeah, and I think they should have taken more of an opportunity of it. I suspect Stockport will be resting some of these to get them out at Edgeley Park, and probably went to Salford trying to maybe sneak a win, but try and keep things as tight as possible. So I think it's actually a little bit of a missed opportunity for Salford. I mean, Stockport, to some extent, I think will come away kicking themselves, thinking that they had a bit of a poor performance, because I didn't.
That was well below the standards they can hit.
It is, yeah.
Well
I mean,
below.
And especially, they came out fighting a bit more in the second half, but that first half, especially, I thought they were really, really poor. I know they hit the crossbar just before Matt Smith got his goal, but I didn't think much of Salford. There were some notable good players. I thought, Watt, Bolton, Matt Smith up front especially had some good games, but they can play better. And I thought Stockport probably should have got a goal from this game, and Paddy Madden especially, I think they really, really missed.
I think the big drawback for this game was that it was on the same time as Eurovision. So, most of us on this call, our priorities, Chris is different because he doesn't enjoy music clearly as much as myself, David and Harry do. But, I mean, I had Eurovision and this on at the same time, and I've got to be honest, I was more interested in the songs than the football because I did not find this a particularly great game. Not particularly enjoyable.
No, it wasn't
at all. Probably really, as you say, Chris, only one real moment. And it was kind of a minute of a close moment and then an ideal moment. Ryan Crosdale had a rebound off the bar for Stockport, and I think within 60 seconds, Salford get the lead through Matt Smith, a ball in from Elliot Watt. What's people's opinions on this goal then? Because first of all, I couldn't really work out who it came off first. I thought it was an own goal. I think you said it's gone on Matt Smith's shoulder. But there's a lot of people wondering if there's a foul on this.
So I was looking at this as well, and Matt Smith's he's 6'6" and he's pretty well built, so it's always tough to defend against him. I think the defender was basically wrapping himself around Matt Smith. Matt Smith was wrapping himself around the defender, and they both went down together and it bounced off. I'm pretty convinced Smith and went in. And so on that basis, I don't think the ref can really give a foul either way, since they're both
It's the way I've always felt about Matt Smith, though, isn't it? He's such a difficult player to handle when it crosses in at him, because you've got a guy who, as you say, is that size. He's either going to beat you to the header, and if he realises he isn't, he's quite clever in the way that he can almost kind of drag you onto the ball yourself to make it go in off you. It's horrible to deal with.
Yeah, so I don't think it was a foul. And it's a horrible one. It's not a pretty goal. It's a very
at all.
It's a very League Two goal.
Very fitting of the game, I've got to say, really.
Yeah, it was quite an ugly game, and I think part of that was because, Stockport set out, I think, to frustrate Salford a little bit. They didn't have their key players. Salford, I don't think, were quite at the top of their game, but they'll be pleased to come away with a win. And it'll be interesting going into this reverse tie at Ashley Park, if some of the strikers and key players that Stockport were missing are available.
Be key if they did. I've got to give a mention to Ben Hinchcliffe, who made a very good save to deny Conor McCanley in the second half.
He's a cracking goalkeeper. I think he's come, if I'm not mistaken, he's come with them since Conference North.
2016, they bought him as a non-league side. I was talking with Ross through our preview. He was part-time when he started out. He was a truck driver.
He was, yeah.
And he's got himself up to a professional standard, and good on him.
Yeah, and he's clearly been working on the technical side of things and been in the gym and really just worked on everything. He's become a real force to be reckoned with, actually.
How intriguing do you find the second leg at Edgeley Park now, Harry? How excited are you to see how Stockport respond really to a very below par first leg performance?
Yeah, I think they'll come out of that thinking that they've got away with it a bit, really. I was disappointed with the defending. Obviously, we've talked about the three main attacking outputs missing, but it was pretty much a full strength back five. And I think some of the chances that they allowed Salford to have would frustrate me if I was Dave Challoner. I think there was that.
He didn't look happy, did he?
No, not at all. It was early on. I can't remember if it was a corner or a free kick, and the ball came back into the box to Adrian Mariappa, who had about a quarter of the pitch to himself. Maybe should have done a little bit better with it, but I watched it back and I was just questioning how nobody had picked him up. He had so much space on that side. Again, maybe it was a foul from Matt Smith, but when you've got a big guy in the box like that, you need to be getting more men around him, especially when you've got three centre-backs on the pitch. And I mean, we're talking about the size of Matt Smith. Fraser Horsfall is a big guy as well.
Yeah, that's a real clash of the titans, that.
Yeah, and I think I was a bit disappointed that he didn't sort of muscle him out a bit better. I think if Matt Smith's going to be winning a header in the box, I think he needs to rise like a phoenix really to get to it. But I think with it only being...
I know what you did there.
Right. But I've also... Is the rise like a phoenix as in jumping? I thought it was like from the ashes.
No, it's a Eurovision reference.
Oh, I see, okay.
I was trying so hard to fit it in there. But yeah, it's only 1-0. I think if Stockport can get an early goal, especially if they've got at least one or two of those three big guys out, back in the team, then I think the whole crowd's going to get behind them. And yeah, I would probably back them to then turn around and win the tie from there. I think Salford's problem has been that they've just leaked too many goals really towards the end of the season. And obviously they've got away with it with those 3-2 wins. But I think against a team like Stockport, it's probably a bit too much of an ask if they do go behind.
It's really intriguing though, David, isn't it? Because Salford have been the joint second best team on the road in League Two this season, got 40 points in 23 games. It's only Northampton that have done better. And as Harry alluded to, their last 3 games on the road, those 3-2s, they have all been worthy of being called playoff ties with the drama that's taken place in them.
Yeah, I mean, look, Salford have been very hot and cold all season, I find. And I think in general, they've done really well to kind of, I don't want to insult their fans, but I feel like sort of close to the playoffs, such as, to me, like, you know, this game feels very Salford, right? Not really doing much, but still coming out of this game with something. Like, and I'm sure I'm going to get hate for this, but I just feel like that's just what this is.
Keep talking, David. Keep the heat on me.
I just feel like,
I don't know where you're going with this, but go on.
I don't
no,
either.
it's that's as far as I was going. But I feel like, with Stockport, I would agree with you guys. Like, all I've seen is the highlights, but I just feel like they can offer so much more. They have done across the season. And I feel like this obviously isn't Stockport at their best. I'm just conscious that if they don't have any of those attackers return, how much of a threat are they actually going to be? Like,
Well, they need Isaac Oluwathi on the pitch because Stretton is he's a very young player, still getting used to it. But Oluwathi can offer some quality. I really loved him at Sutton. I thought it was a great signing when he arrived in January, and I think there's a difference when they've got Oluwathi on there compared to Stretton, certainly.
But I think it really begs the question: why was he not starting in this game straight off? He's
Possible fitness, maybe. You never know. Can't be quite sure.
It just worries me a bit, that you've kind of got this experienced player, or certainly more experienced than Stretton is, and you've chosen him over. Maybe it's the fact he's a young player and he's impressed, but in a game like this, with the amount of pressure there is in a playoff game,
I think some of it is if there's any risk of an injury, go to Salford, keep it tight, bring it back to Edgeley Park where you've got 10,000 very loud fans behind you, and push it on there. I really think that's the game plan.
Intriguing second leg ahead on Saturday lunchtime, 12:30. That second leg, Stockport County v Salford City at Edgeley Park. One final game to mention for League Two. This was on Sunday evening at 7 o'clock at Valley Parade. Bradford City 1, Carlisle United 0 was the final score in West Yorkshire. In terms of team news for this, Bradford were completely unchanged from the final day game against Leyton Orient. Harry Lewis in goal, the standard common back Thor in front of him, Liam Riddles, Romney Critchlow, Sam Stubbs, Brad Halliday from left to right. They played a 4-3-3, which contained a midfield trio of Adam Clayton, Alex Gilliard and Richie Smallwood. Jamie Walker starting on the left, Scott Banks starting on the right, and the main man Andy Cook leading the line. Two changes to Carlisle, one at the back and one up top. Ben Barkley, who, after being talked about in the previews, has had his loan from Stockport extended for these playoffs. He was moved out of his right wing-back role into defence alongside Paul Huntington and Corey Whelan, all playing ahead of Thomas Holly, who was in goal. Joel Senior was one of the switches to Jack Robertson. He took that right wing-back role. Jack Armour occupied the opposite flank. Owen Moxon, Callum Guy, Arthur McCalmont, Thor in the midfield three. The other change saw Joe Garner pick to partner Amari Patrick up top ahead of Christian Dennis. I was expecting a battle in this game, and it duly was. This is a very tight tie we've got ahead of us. This is far from done. The goal, Jamie Walker, early around sort of midway through the first half, a bit before midway. It's one of those goals, I think, that your opinion on depends on what side you are as to whether you like it or not. I think myself as a neutral, I kind of like it. I quite like Route 1 goals. I don't think there's enough of them in football. There's more. They're quite fun to watch. It's a form of football I don't think will ever die, really, compared to what some people might want it to. But I'm sure if you're a Carlisle perspective, you're throwing up just at the thought of watching that happen. It's such a mess from their perspective.
It's a lovely goal, but it's horrible defending.
Exactly. That's the way I feel about it.
There was just so much space. You can't allow them that much space. You just can't.
It all starts on the goalkeeper, Harry Lewis. He just sends it upfield. It's one header back, one header forwards, and it breaks through the Walker. And I was there at the time at Valley Parade, and I could tell the moment that Walker broke through, I could see on Thomas Holly's face, he knew, uh-oh, I'm in trouble here. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to handle this shot that's coming at me.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was bouncing nice for Walker. It was at a nice position away from goal. He had space to shape up, find his spot and hit it. It's just criminal defending. He should just not be given that much space and that much time to basically pick a spot and hit it.
Well, it was one of only 4 shots on goal that we had all game, and I think after Bradford got that lead in the 18th minute, it was really Carlisle that I think were knocking throughout the rest of this, giving a real test to Bradford. And Bradford had their warnings in this from those tests that Carlisle provided. They were quite fortunate, I think, to not find themselves tested a lot more than they had. I remember a couple of corners being swung in by Carlisle that dropped loose in the 6-yard box, and Harry Lewis was able to collect. Carlisle lead the league for set-piece goals, and it's not a surprise seeing them there. That in-swing and delivery from Moxon can cause a lot of problems with the people attacking it. Got to give a lot of credit, I think, Harry, to that Bradford defence, and particularly Sam Stubbs, who was been excellent signs since arriving from Exeter City and once again demonstrated it yesterday at Valley Parade.
Yeah, I think they've come in for a bit of criticism this season. I don't know how justified it's really been. Sam Stubbs was brilliant. Ridehalgh and Halliday, the two full-backs, I thought were brilliant. Again, Brad Halliday's been an absolutely great signing for them. And I mean, you mentioned that Carlisle did have a few chances, but I think they did quite a good job of at least making them difficult enough that they weren't maybe clear-cut. I mean, aside from that Joe Garner wonder shot that came back off the crossbar, I can't really remember them sort of utilising a good opportunity. Those corners that were coming in, at the very least, the Bradford defence were putting enough pressure on that the headers tended to be tame, and there were a few of them that from the telly cameras looked like they were going in until you realised that the ball was travelling at about a mile an hour. And then the same again, I remember Christian Dennis rounding the goalkeeper, and you think maybe...
I thought Lewis did really well to come out there, close
Yeah.
that angle off, leave him. He basically had such a tight angle to score from when he went round him.
Yeah, they did a really good job of just pushing him out into that position, and it would have taken something pretty spectacular to get it on target. So I think they did a pretty good job of neutralising Carlisle, and I think one of the things that I spoke about in the preview show, I think, was that I was concerned that outside of Christian Dennis, there's maybe not enough goal scoring in this Carlisle side, and I think that sort of showed. I don't think anybody really had enough of a cutting edge to test Bradford as much as they should have done.
Strong performance from Sam Stubbs, Critchlow alongside him, Liam Ridehalgh, left back, as I said. But David, I want to give a mention to Brad Halliday, the right back for Bradford, because he had one hell of a workload in that game yesterday at Valley Parade. Starts out almost directly up against Amari Patrick, who I think him and Sam Stubbs did a very good job on, because Patrick's one of those players whose turn of pace, that moving in behind, can make him a real handful to deal with. And he was largely ineffective in this game against his former side, and I think he was rightly hooked in the second half to be replaced by one of the strikers Ryan Edmondson brought on. Likewise, Joe Garner was brought after, replaced by Christian Dennis, and that did have a bit of a positive impact on Carlisle. And then after seeing Patrick come off, Halliday's main opponent is Jack Armour, who's a wing-back playing very high and wide. And when you're a right-back in a back four up against a wing-back playing high and wide that the ball is constantly getting switched out to, that is a really, really difficult job.
I mean, it's definitely not what you want, is it? I mean, you're already kind of outmatched when there's the possibility of the striker pulling out a bit wider. I mean, within that formation as well, you know, there's the possibility of having Moxon kind of drift into that wide space as well. So in that sense, at times you can have almost three players cutting around you. That's not a nice prospect. And I mean, as you touched on there, I don't think I could be a defender in League Two, full stop, right? Let me just make that very clear. But having someone like Amari Patrick run at you with the pace, as you say, like the pace and the speed he offers, you don't want to be in that position, do you? Like, it's bad enough having one person run at you, let alone having multiple that kind of have the ability to do that. And I think, you know, Carlisle actually did a really good job in some areas of kind of overwhelming or attempting to overwhelm Bradford. I mean, Halliday definitely stood his ground, but I'm just wondering if those kind of matchups are going to make a big difference and how those formation changes, or whether either manager decides to change those formations based on kind of trying to get that sort of overload in those wide areas. I think Bradford did well to see it off in this game, but with such a tight affair, I mean, to me, the amount of shots that both teams were able to get off is a good amount that they were both able to get off. Like, in terms of shots on target, not great from either side. I would have to say that, you know, both obviously need to be a bit more clinical coming into this next one. Maybe Bradford less so with the lead, as slender as it is. But I'd be really interested to see the tactical matchup that these two managers come away with, especially given the pressure that's been put on certain areas of the pitch in this one.
There's a couple of major points that I really have to Bradford. Firstly, they've got to hold possession so much better, because there were times when they were leading and they'd get the ball and you're just thinking, just slow this down, play a couple of passes, work it through, no need to go instantly forwards, and it would be lost and Carlisle would go straight back at them again before they've even got into a more natural, non-defensive structure, and that was a real frustration in the Valley Parade crowd and indeed to myself watching on. And then I suppose what I also have a bit of confidence in is actually Bradford's defence as a whole. We've always known it's quite good. Harry Lewis has been great this season. There's some great defenders in there in that back four. And then Mark Hughes, if he needs to, like he did in this game, can go and shut off shot towards the latter stages, get Matty Platon, go to a back five, make it really difficult for them to break down. And I'm starting to feel like, Harry, this second leg up at Brunton Park, there's every chance that Bradford defence could be what sends them through to Wembley.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they did such a good job in this first leg, and I think, like I mentioned before, there's just not enough goals really in this Carlisle side, and I think if they just turn up and they play a sensible game, Bradford, they know that they're going to have the crowd against them. They know that Carlisle are obviously going to be well up for it, but just do the job that they've been doing. Don't try anything too silly. You've got the advantage of having a big man up top in Andy Cook, who you can lump the ball forward to if you need to. You don't have to always be committing loads of players to the attack. Just sort of play patiently, and then if you get one or two chances in the game, that might be all you need. That's been the case for them a lot this year, where Andy Cook has just turned up and scored where they've maybe not been creating a lot. And I completely agree. I wouldn't be surprised to see this one either a 0-0 or a 1-0 either side.
There's been very little in it with these two all season, really. They've been tight affairs in the regular season, likely to be in these playoffs as well. But Chris, Bradford have got to be pleased that they have got that lead to go to Cumbria, because I pointed on this in the preview. They do not have a good history at Brunton Park. You've got to go back, I think, to 1985 for the last time they won up there. Now, they don't need to win up there in this game, and that has to be seen as a positive. But there's no doubt this second leg they are going to get a test by Paul Simpson's side up in Cumbria.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, actually, sort of on the sort of the same outcome, but on the converse, I was slightly worried about them in this home match, just with the way some of their home performances have been this season. And so I think actually to have that 1-goal lead for that reason is also really, really important. I mean, I'm not too sure how much I ever buy into these sort of long-term trends at various grounds, because I think some of it's quite often just sort of coincidence. But for sure, it'll be interesting to see how they get on. But I think absolutely they've got to take a lot of confidence in the fact that they've got this 1-goal lead going in.
We had very mixed opinions when it came to our preview about who we thought these two was going to progress. We all unanimously thought Stockport, and we're kind of hoping Stockport do turn it around for the sake of our own predictions in the second leg. But has anyone had second thoughts potentially about this Bradford-Carlisle tie after seeing the first leg?
I can't remember who I said.
No, I mean,
great.
Because it was always going to be quite tight. I'm thinking it'll be Bradford to progress right now, just for the fact that I've just said there they've got this 1-goal win in this first game, where I thought it might be difficult for them to get a win.
I mean, for me, I've still got Bradford, although my only worry would be, I have a feeling, although we've mentioned the rest of the back line, there's something for me across the season when I've watched Romelu Critchlow that I just feel like he's not very good when he's being pressed. There's been a couple of times when he gets really pressed by the attackers where he struggles a bit in terms of composure and that sort of decision making. Excuse me. And I'm wondering whether that's potentially going to factor in here as well. And if kind of Carlisle are putting a lot of pressure onto him, like Sam Stubbs on the ball is good, but I'm wondering whether, I've not seen him much, admittedly, but the times I have seen him, he's made some mistakes on the ball. Most notably, I think to Timothy Dieng, he made a couple of mistakes where he was left dawdling, when Gillingham played them. And I'm a bit worried in that respect, but if he can get the cover from Stubbs and they've got the kind of strategy in place for that, I don't see Bradford losing this one.
Harry?
Yeah, I think I'd probably stick with Bradford. I'm pretty sure I said that Bradford were the team that I thought were going to win over the two legs. And now that they've got this win, I think in a weird way, I was more concerned about how they'd get on at Valley Parade. I know it's not entirely rooted in anything statistical that anybody can work out, but there does seem to be this issue at Valley Parade where Bradford, for some reason, struggle more than other teams do at home. Whether I'm just perpetuating the myth there.
No, it's true that I think they're 10th in the home league table compared to like second or third away from home.
Yeah, there you go. So I think to have kept a clean sheet and to have got that goal quite early on really as well, and still done such a professional job of just seeing the game out and taking that lead up to Cumbria. I think they'll probably carry that on, and I think they're probably the more dangerous to the two teams And I think if they score the next goal in the tie, I can't see Carlisle getting 2 back and pulling it back.
You and I both said Carlisle, Chris, to progress.
Yeah, I think I maybe edged that because I was slightly worried about Bradford's home performance. So I'm going to change my mind, which means that Carlisle will get through to the final, and so I can claim to be right.
I tell you what, though, when you look at this game on face value, and even though Bradford have that lead, look at these two teams across the whole of the season, right? They've got the same amount of points. They've got the same amount of wins, losses, draws. Their goal difference is not far off each other. There's 5 goals in terms of goal difference that have separated these two sides across a whole season. Like, anybody that didn't expect this to be tight, some sort of tight affair between these two sides, like, for me, this was the game that I was going to find the hardest to call. Mm-hmm. Like, some of the others, I was like, okay, fair enough. Like, you know, I was pretty decisive on that one, but this for me was the one I was like, they've been neck and neck with each other for the entirety of the season. Just that moment of brilliance from Walker with that Lewis ball over the top, maybe that'll make the difference. But I think maybe we're underestimating Paul Simpson a little here. I'm still going for Bradford, but I'm wondering whether Simpson across the season, he's been throwing in some, you know, this is a team that we didn't expect.
Go on, David, get back on that fence you like getting on.
This is a team that we didn't even expect to be in this position come the beginning of the season. And the fact they've got themselves here is brilliant. I'm wondering whether Simpson will bring something else in. You know, as I've said, I'm still going for Bradford, but, you know, Paul Simpson, let's not sleep on him.
Nicely poised. Second leg for them is Saturday, 3:00 at Brunton Park. Carlisle United against Bradford City. Bradford City 1-0 up from the first leg. That's going to wrap up this episode. It's been an interesting one between the 4 of us on this call. Myself, Chris, Harry and David. Chris's microphone playing up ever so slightly. Harry trying to shuffle in Eurovision references without most of us realising, except for myself, so I do appreciate that. We will be back at the end of this weekend to run through the second legs, and we'll know for sure then who will be going to the playoff finals in League 1 and League 2. Join us for then. We'll see you then. Goodbye. I think Bolton are going to need to grab a goal, I have a feeling. It's my feeling with that. I think what am I saying? Of course they need a goal. What am I saying?
The game of 2 hours.
What am I saying?
I didn't realise Michael Owen was on the
I've just realised there's no such thing as away goals in this, and it wouldn't matter anyway. What's I've had a real brain thought there. This has been some episode. Oh, boy.
Thinks they're playing in the Champions League quarterfinals.
You don't think is that you could have carried on talking. No one was going to call you out on that.
No, I'll call myself out on it when I realise I made a mistake. So yeah, I'll do that with that. What a load of nonsense that is.
This is going to be a fun one to edit for you, Ed.
Oh, I'm going to be at this for hours. I'm going to take out your banging. That's the problem. Which is difficult when you're on the same audio track as Harry and David. I called him Luke then. What's wrong with me today?
Deep breath.
You're all different
right,
names.
Chris.
You're all different.
It's a good job at sending.
You're all different.
We're all
names
going
now.
mad.
Just losing my mind. Oh.